To kick off today's show, I want to thank the city of Nashville for its tremendous hospitality. I would also like to congratulate David Poyle on a phenomenal career. With the 37th overall pick in the 2023 NHL draft, I select goaltender Endo Mills. Endo, how are you?
It's a great honor. I want to thank my coaches that I've had throughout my career, whether it's, as a junior, as a little kid. I also want to thank my mom for working really hard as a single mother. I was the only child, I was an only child, but not a lonely child. I also want to thank Jesus. I'm doing pretty good, Tougie. How about yourself? There's some interesting topics you have to talk about today.
Holy hell, is there? Today's show, as per usual, we get to talk about the positives and the negatives. Move that webcam over a little bit. We get to talk about the positives and the negatives of the hockey world, in which, Jesus Christ, there just can't help but be negatives that might not be negative long term, but that are negatives short term, at least for some people. We'll get into all of that.
Yeah.
And actually, screw it. We might as well, I guess, jump into the main portion of the show. It's going to be very hockey heavy. But before we do that, as always, we need to mention that this podcast is brought to you by our lovely friends at manscaped.com, who want to remind you that you can go to, that is again, manscaped.com, and use the code Tougie, Tougie, for 20% off your order and free shipping. Again, when you order from manscaped.com, the best you can get, the pinnacle, the peak, in terms of men's grooming, but grooming in general, as we like to say. These are universal tools, which might be a good episode title, to be honest. Universal tools sums us up relatively well. But again,
there you go.
I mean, it depends on who you ask, let's be honest. But again, we want to thank Manscaped for sticking with the show, and we'll get things kicked off with the one viewer question that we're going to have for this episode, because it kind of leads us into a different talking point. A little bit short on time, and want to make sure we give proper time to at least the biggest story of today. But this viewer question comes from one Cynical Blues. What's the biggest monetary value contract you expect to see given out tomorrow once free agency opens? Now, the name pool is a little bit shallow for free agency tomorrow. It's not the biggest free agent class of all time. I don't know if we technically want to count RFAs, especially because I doubt we see anybody offer sheeted. It wouldn't be the worst decision in the world for someone to, say, go after Edmonton's Evan Bouchard, as has been talked about by Oilers fans a lot. With $7.1 million in cap space, they are expecting both Bouchard and Ryan McLeod to take bridge deals. And, well, Bouchard might not be up for that. So if someone sends him a decent little offer, who knows what might happen. But for UFAs, at least in terms of point total from last season, you are looking at Alex Killorn, which you would expect Tampa to be doing everything they can do to keep him. That's why they moved Ross Colton. Patrice Bergeron, whose future is still very much up in the air. Patrick Kane. I mean, if you want to go after Patrick Kane, sure. Is he going to be commanding like $7+ million? I can't imagine. Matt Duchene is now out there, which we'll talk a little bit more about that. He and a few other players were bought out of their contracts today. Then you get the likes of Max Domi, Michael Bunting, Tyler Bertuzzi. For defenseman, Dmitry Orlov will be out there, not re-signing with the Bruins. Ryan O'Reilly is a free agent. I would be shocked if any one of those players named is able to command more than $7 million a season. I feel like that already. Like, I would say anything over 6. I don't know if there's any player on that list that I named where I'm like, yep, $6 million per sounds good. But somebody will get at least that much. I mean, outside of Dmitry Orlov, I would be very nervous to see anybody get that amount of money. So I think free agency tomorrow, Endo, normally that's a day where a lot of people watch to be like, oh, who's my team going to get? But tomorrow I feel like, the vibe is, oh no, who is my team going to pay too much money for? I feel like that's how most people are feeling today.
Yeah, I think the one thing we'll talk about for sure is overpayments from general managers who have just started their tenure. Brad Treliving, holy shit! Like that is no offense to you, buddy. You're probably a great GM and a great guy, but that is a massive overpayment. We'll get into more of that later, obviously.
We were going to talk about that signing, so we can do it now.
Yeah.
The Leafs re-signing David Camp to a 4-year deal worth $2.4 million per. David Camp is a really solid player. He is. But that is not the type of guy that you necessarily want to be paying $2.4 million for per season when you already have 3 guys making $10 million per or more at the top of the roster. You know, someone argued this because it's Twitter, with me the other day, but you look at the Edmonton Oilers re-signing a fairly comparable player. There are some differences, but Derek Ryan fetched less than $1 million. That is that's a tremendous contract. Really solid bottom sixer making under $1 million. Those are the type of guys that you need to really kind of cultivate that roster. Or, you look at the Vegas Golden Knights and William Carrier, Keegan Colasar, both making $1.4 million, although I think Colasar was technically making less for this past season. That's just what you need to actually know. It is $1.4 million this year for both those two. So, it's just one of those things where keeping David Camp, very good idea. At that price point, maybe just a little bit rich. I don't think it'll kill him. But when you end up signing a couple of contracts like that, you get into certain cap situations that maybe you have to miss out on a deal that could have been the deal to push the team over the edge. Who's to say? But Endo, the David Camp signing, I feel like you kind of on the same page as I am, where it's just like, yeah, good signing, but a little bit much.
Yeah, good guy to keep around. I guess he wanted a little bit more money to stay around for that long, which is cool. I mean, I think maybe he wanted more money initially. I'm not going to speak for the guy because he doesn't even know who the fuck I am. But the general vibe of the contract probably seems like he wanted a lot of money. But they're like, okay, we'll give you the same amount of money, but just over 4 years. And I want to see what he's guaranteed in the minors too, because who knows, he could drop. Also signing Pontus Holmberg, that was same day as well too. How do you sign Camp for 2.4 and then sign Holmberg for 2 years at $800K a year?
I mean, I feel like Holmberg hasn't played as much and hasn't proved as much, but
yeah. I'm waiting for, Sid mentioned this on Twitter. Someone's going to go crazy about the Marlies prospects of Bobby McMahon. And Bobby McMahon is an AHL legend, okay? Undrafted, unproven. Well, now proven at the AHL level. Maybe you should just give, who's your captain? Logan Shaw. Give Logan Shaw a 2-way deal. Have him come up as well. Why not? Jeez.
For Leafs fans.
You're strapped for. My one thing is that you have to re-sign Nylander. You have to re-sign Matthews. You have to make an attempt to re-sign Ryan O'Reilly because he might go to the free agency. Yeah, he's gone.
He is. He's gone. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but you give up those deals. Excuse me, ridiculous. If I were a GM in this case, maybe my whole thing would be grabbing the secure guys first and then realizing what cap I have left after. Not sign the little guys and then try to work around with some wizardry to figure out what you're going to do to pay the big guys the money that they either deserve or they're going to overpay. So right now, a little bit of an overpayment. I'm kind of skeptical to see what's happening. And then there's rumors that, the Nylander camp and the Treliving / Oilers, Treliving / Toronto Maple Leafs camp are far apart, which is not good news going into a contract year where he could have an insane massive season and ask for a lot more money. And then, whoops, you signed Camp for a little bit too much, or Kampf, you sign him. And now you don't have money to sign a top player for the money that he deserves.
A shout out to Cynical Blues again for the question, but as we mentioned at the top, we do have a lot to talk about, and we will get into What is the biggest story in hockey right now? And no, it's not the draft from Wednesday and Thursday, the trades, the buyouts. We'll get to all of that. It is the story that broke last night and that we have continued to get information about as today has gone on. And we will continue to get information about this because there's clearly a lot in the air. But we will try to recap everything that we know right now. And that is, of course, the news surrounding the PHF and the future of women's hockey. And we have done our best to, shine a spotlight when we can, where we can. And, well, hey, spotlight's fully on women's hockey right now. So in a press release today, quote, a new women's pro hockey league to launch in January of 2024. The slated schedule, by the way, is a training camp in November, exhibition games preseason in December, and then the league starting in January. The new league was announced today by business and philanthropic leaders Mark and Kimbra Walter, sports icon Billie Jean King, and the Premier Hockey Federation governors Johanna and John Boynton. The league will be supported financially by the Walters and led by board members including King, sports executive Alana Kloss, and LA Dodgers president Stan Kasten. This new league, by the way, as others have deemed it, I'll be calling it this throughout kind of this little recap here. We'll be calling it One League, which it won't be the actual name, but that's kind of the thing that people are going with. Essentially what has happened, One League has acquired assets to the PHF, and the PHF now essentially will cease to exist. The PHF is dead. And at the same time, One League, which is essentially being built upon the backs of the PWHPA, the Pro Women's Hockey Players Association. They have come to terms on a CBA, collective bargaining agreement, in terms of all the standard stuff that you would expect, base level contracts, insurances, so on and so forth. Throughout the rest of this article, Mark Walter said this, quote, I have always believed that professional sports should bring the highest level of performance in organization, and this new league will have the backing and resources it needs to represent the very best in women's hockey. And again, for Mark Walter, he is the controlling owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers, the WNBA's LA Sparks, a co-general partner of the ownership group for the Premier League's Chelsea Football Club, and holds a significant interest in the Lakers as well. There are a lot more statements like this within this press release, not only from management, but also from those with the PWHPA, like their leader, Jana Hefford, and player Kendall Coyne Schofield. Essentially, a few years ago, the PWHPA became a thing where you had two leagues, the CWHL, which, if I'm not mistaken, was, of course, the one to fold, and then the NWHL, which became the PHF, if I'm not mistaken. But essentially, yes, you had this situation where two leagues were going to become one. And the members of the PWHPA said, we do not believe in the vision of the sole remaining league, the PHF. So we are not going to play. They are the group that was leading the charge for the NHL needs to help us like the NBA helps the WNBA so that we can have a solid foundation to try and grow the game. So essentially, in a way, the PWHPA short term have won. They have outlasted the PHF. They are with this ownership group that has essentially bought the PHF, taken the assets that they've wanted, and thrown away the rest of it. Now, excuse me. By design,
so scummy. I'm hopping in right now. Okay. It is super scummy. One thing that you didn't mention too is that the CWHL, the Canadian Women's Hockey League, was the first ever North American league to expand over to Europe. In this case, Asia. In this case, China, because they had the Shenzhen hockey team, a women's team in China, which was completely insane. Cool that they did that. And it was like, okay, cool. And then immediately after that season, they announced, hey, we're paying the women. First league to openly say we're paying the women and paid the women. A week after they crowned the Markham Thunder as champions, they announced the league has folded because they cannot afford it. and then I believe it was Toronto Maple Leafs, the Calgary Flames, and I believe the Montreal Canadiens all had to buy out their situation because they were that far in debt. And then the focus went over to the NWHL, which then became the PHF. As far as I know, the CWHL is like, no, the PWHPA is like honestly, it's the Phoenix from the CWHL. Because that's what the vibes are, and some of the vibes. Jesus Christ, I'm such a zoomer. That's what the general feel of this is. It feels a lot like the CWHL, where they're trying to over-accomplish and overdo certain things without having a set up boundary line to really follow. And it's just like, okay, now we can't come to terms with you guys on an agreement. We literally own you plus ratio. This is basically what just happened. They just bought the fucking rights for the company, for the organization, and said, yeah, you're out of a job now. Excuse me. You're out of a job now. You work for us. And yeah, good luck. See you.
Well, yeah, we'll get into all of that now. God. I brought up that press conference because you read it, and by design, it reads as, hey, this is nothing but a positive, which, of course, if you buy something, you're going to tout that acquisition as nothing but a positive, But what that article does not mention at all is the PWHF players, because as of this moment, they are all fucked.
Yep.
Is the only way to put it. Now, one league decided to go full Vegas Golden Knights and did not notify the players ahead of time, most of them learning about this acquisition through Twitter, like most people. They also learned that their contracts were being voided.
Yep.
So, to go into this, technically, one league, PWHPA, it is not their fault inherently that these contracts are being voided. The PHF had clauses to cut contracts whenever they wanted. The PHF, the big thing was, we're raising the cap up to 1.5 million. We're going to try to make sure that there's a living wage here, and that these players can play professionally and not have to have other jobs. But at the end of the day, the contracts weren't guaranteed. And there were some PHF players and agents who knew, oh no, this is not good. And they tried to fight against this release clause, but they lost. So in this situation, the players have no protection and have just outright lost their jobs in this instance.
Yep.
Now, the primary reason for this clause was that the PHF, they wanted to be able to protect themselves financially, obviously, in case of, hey, money's tight. Sorry, we can't really afford to pay your contract anymore. You got to go. Well, as was reported, and this comes from Shayna on Twitter, speculation tonight from some in the industry that the PHF was on shaky financial footing and may have been considering bankruptcy, that is. Endo, if you had something to interject, unless I just covered what you were going to mention.
I was going to say it's crazy. Well, now I'm going to say something else entirely, but it makes sense as to why they would let themselves be bought out, because they were going under. Another thing too is that the basically a clause that says like, fuck you, we out, is the most concerning thing about this. Not only that, is that on the surface, they're like, hey, we're going to raise the salary cap. But in the background, they don't have any money.
Yeah.
How can you, like, I'm not an idiot. I'm also not a genius. But I know for a fact, if I don't have money, I'm not going to announce, hey, I have more money to pay our players.
Mm.
Like, it just seemed like a lot of the stuff about the PHF, as much as I love women's hockey and everything, was kind of like to one-up people. It's like, oh, women's hockey can't be profitable. All right, we're going to announce more money and all this stuff. It's like, man, I just want to watch hockey, but I get like the sport's not growing as fast as it should have. But at the same time, like, shit takes a long time to build up. The WNBA was around for like 20 years or something like that before it became profitable, and now it's just becoming profitable.
So if it was true that the PHF was potentially heading towards bankruptcy, then obviously like folding the contracts for this new league makes sense, as much as it sucks for the players. It makes sense. About 120 PHF players, you're going into this new league. Like, yes, obviously you would want those players to have to renegotiate their contracts and to have them, sign deals that are consistent with what everyone else in this new one league is signing, according to that CBA that they've negotiated. But then there's further issues for the PHF players, where again they're just the ones who get boned in this situation, and it sucks. Right now, those players have no right to give any input in regards to that CBA that was negotiated by one league and the PWHBA players. Said players will be voting on Sunday as to whether or not to include PHF players in the CBA that they established. So right now, PHF players are still very much in limbo. And the PHF players don't get to vote in that discussion. It is solely down to the PWHPA players, because those PHF players are not a part of the PWHPA union, in air quotes, because as was reported on today, that union technically doesn't legally exist, as they're not listed within the Department of Labor's acknowledged organized unions.
Oh my god.
So
it's literally, you can't sit with us. It's we're gonna vote. You're voting on someone else's behalf. That's so stupid. You already have your CBA agreement. You're not gonna be like, oh, should we include these people in an agreement that they have no say in, which may have certain things, certain clauses that they don't agree to? No. Okay, but they're allowed to be with us. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's just it's this is like a first of the modern sport era, that a league buys out the property of the league, scorches earth, and then says, we can let you play with us, but you can't vote as to we can't let you play with us, but we can vote if we're going to want you in or not, and you have no say. This is the CWHL 2.0. This is scary. This is even worse for women's hockey in North America than anything ever before. I saw some woman who recently signed over in Europe with the WSHL, with the Women's Swedish Hockey League. They're probably breathing a sigh of relief right now to not have to deal with this headaches. With now knowing that, you don't have a job, you don't have this. People are gonna say, hockey's a privilege. Yeah, it is a privilege, but you took away their job. They took our jobs. They took our jobs. It's fucking hilarious. It's sad, but it's hilarious at the same time.
So, in this new one league, PWHPA players will have priority access, it appears at least, to the contracts in the new league. And yeah, most PHF players, as it stands, will essentially be treated like late summer UFA editions, as Shane have worded it here. It just sucks. It just sucks. Again, like, essentially, if you're not drafted into this new league, you're going to have to go through a tryout. And then there's the other situation of some of the women in the PHF. What if their way of staying in the United States or Canada was tied to the fact that they had a job as a professional athlete, and now that they lost that job, there's no guarantee that you keep that work visa to stay here? That is a potential other aspect that we have to wait to see if one league will do anything about to help out these particular players. So in some ways, I don't view one league as inherently evil or the PHWPA. in the idea of like, okay, if it's true that the PHF was going under, somebody swooped in to try and save the day. And obviously, with that one league swooping in, they were tied with the PHWPA. Obviously, the women in that quote unquote union are going to get the first crack because this is what they were fighting for, as opposed to the women that said, well, I'm going to go play in the PHF. I'm not going to hold out. It's a very messy situation. And again, it's not resolved. Ian Kennedy mentioned this. A source involved tells me the new single entity owner does not like the current PHF team names, and they will likely be changed. As well, the league is going to be going from 7 to 6 teams of 23 players each, with presumed 3 Canadian teams and 3 American teams, with it being likely that the Connecticut Whale, the Buffalo Buttes, and the Boston Pride aren't going to be a thing anymore. It's the only way I can think to wrap this up is in conclusion, right? Like, most felt, myself included, that one league for women was going to be the best thing for women's hockey, but how we're getting there, it's a little bit more of a bloodbath than I think we expected. Perhaps we should have expected it to be like this, but now that it's here and you see how people are being affected, it just doesn't feel right. And again, time will tell if this is going to ultimately be a good or a bad thing for women's hockey. I think we all hope that it will end up being a positive, but yeah, right now it's very, very difficult to not look at this situation and get a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah. Man, this is rough. Like, I'm looking back at it, like, I'm looking at the names for stuff like this, and like the names for, like, I'm just looking at the names being like, yeah, this person's probably saying like, oh, bring back the, the affiliation with the NHL and everything, and how they had like Toronto Furies, what is it? What were the other teams, like Mississauga Chiefs? Oh man, like there's so many different teams here. Yeah, so it was the Shenzhen KRS Vankerais, which is based out of Shenzhen, China. How the fuck are you gonna fly to China to play hockey games? I'm looking back at like revisionist now. We're on the CWHL, and just how the fuck can I fly to China for hockey games? I think they did like one trip to China, and then Toronto Furies, Vankerais, and they had the Canadiens de Montreal, Calgary Inferno, Markham Thunder. You could tell what these teams were all affiliated with. Like,
yeah,
it's crazy, and this is just super messy. And I got nothing else to say about just this is nuts. You can't get rid of you can't get rid of the staple teams of the PHF. You just finished expanding over the Montreal, and you had your 7 teams. You don't go back. You need to keep those 7, keep it established. Like, I don't care if it's like a revenue thing, there's no arenas there. Like, you don't even have a league playing yet. Maybe it has something to do with, playing in the same rink size, because the Toronto Six were playing out of a international size rink, and then you go to like the Boston Pride, they're playing out of like a junior size rink, and kind of taking what you can kind of thing. I know, like, it's just a lot, man.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just one of those situations where right now we just don't know, and obviously you hope that it's gonna work out, but that's all we're kind of stuck with right now. Is like, okay, we have to hope for the best, and that's kind of where fans of women's hockey have been for the past bit. Is all right, we just gotta hope for the best, and then it gets more difficult to do so based off of days like this. So we'll continue to follow it, as I'm sure most people will, but it's been a weird near 24 hours since this word came out. We will move on to talk about the NHL and everything that's gone on. Obviously, we're gearing up for free agency tomorrow. Maybe even today by the time this is posted. But of course, the draft was on Wednesday. There was the draft itself, all the trades, the buyouts that have happened. But in regards to the draft, people were asking me, "Hey, you're going to do a live stream?" And I'm like, I don't know. And the reason why I didn't want to do a live stream for the draft is it's boring. Let's be honest, it's pretty boring. Similar, and I mentioned this before, to the NHL awards of, I can't believe this guy won, I can't believe that guy lost, I can't believe this writer voted this way, I can't believe this writer did this. We do that every year. The Hockey Hall of Fame. I can't believe this person made it in. I'm glad this person made it in. Can you believe this person didn't make it in? Oh my God. It's the same thing every year. And the draft. Get ready. There's going to be a bunch of trades. And then there hardly ever is. And get ready. This is going to be crazy. Oh, I can't believe this team took that guy and that team didn't take this guy. And this guy, 3rd rounder, 97th overall. This guy's going to be a fucking steal. Let me tell. It's the same thing every year, and the bottom line is nobody fucking knows. The Beaverton put out a headline. Winners and losers of the 2023 NHL draft based on the 5 minutes of research I did right before it started. Sums it up fucking perfectly. Like, look, we don't know. I get part of the fun. I'm not here to yuck someone else's yum. I get it. If you have that interest in just being like, all right, let's be reactionary because it's fun. Cool. All right, cool. But at the same time, man, it takes like 5 years. I would say 5. You could maybe argue 4. In 4 years ago, you'd be arguing, okay, Alex Turcotte, 5th overall pick. Moritz Seider went 6th overall. And I'm sure people remember the reaction to that of, who, what? They took Moritz, and then look at how Moritz Seider turned out. But on draft night, it was LOL, what's Yzerman doing? And then the smart people were like, no, actually, he's going to be great. And then guess what? We had to wait to see what was going to happen because that's how it works. But if you look like 5 years on from a draft, you can start to see like, okay, yeah, that was a risk that paid off or that was a mistake. Montreal taking Jesperi Kotkaniemi instead of Brady Tkachuk. You had Barrett Hayton and Philip Zadina going 5th and 6th, while Quinn Hughes went 7th overall. Vitaly Kravtsov went 9th overall. He's heading back to the KHL. Like, you kind of get to see what I mean as to who were the mistakes. You can go back on elite prospects, and they'll always have towards the bottom of the page where somebody was ranked heading into that particular draft. And you can go back and see like, okay, sure, here's where the mistakes were made. These were actually fine. You get to this year's draft, though. Connor Bedard goes 1st overall. We all knew it. The obvious hope is that he turns into is the generational talent that's advertised. End of the day, we don't know. Maybe he won't be. That's the crazy thing about this sport. But it was fun to be like, oh shit, Anaheim took Leo Carlsson 2nd overall. But we don't know if that's a mistake yet. We don't. But a few years from now, again, give it at least 4 to 5, you're going to be able to look back on this draft and we're going to know, did Anaheim fuck up by taking Leo Carlsson over Adam Fantilli? It certainly felt like it on draft night, but it might work out. I'm not a fan of being overly reactionary. And then, 4th overall, you get San Jose taking Will Smith. And then Montreal at 5, Arizona at 6. We'll find out. Philly gets Matvei Michkov, 7th overall. On paper, home run. But we just don't know. And it's not because of he's going to be in the KHL for 3 years. Most prospects are in junior or in the NCAA for 3 years. All of a sudden, it's Russia. Like, it's going to be fine, more than likely. But we don't know. Maybe San Jose made the right choice taking the Fresh Prince. Holy shit, was that cringy, though, getting him to sing the fucking song at the panel. My God. Yeah. It's like, your name's Will Smith? Have you heard of Have you heard of the actor? Did you
Oh
know
man, white
that there's an
people, white
actor?
people. God, white people. Why white people? Why are you white? So white. I'm joking, but just God, God,
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Jesus.
It's beautiful.
Right before we started, I was like, "Yeah, I'm turning this off." No, I'm gone. It was like that in the All Star game. I feel not the All Star game for the award show. I feel bad
Yeah.
for that kid because he was reading a script. That kid, that child, I would say, was reading a
Mm,
script off of a teleprompter. So like,
mm.
I feel some mercy for that kid a little bit.
There were some interesting moments. I mean, man, this week for the NHL in terms of cringe, though, between the awards and the draft, poor Carey Price.
Oh
With the
man,
5th overall pick, the Montreal Canadiens select David. Up comes another white guy. Reinbacher, David Reinbacher.
we told him to do that.
I was watching the draft. Fiance's on the couch next to me, and she was playing Stardew Valley on the Switch, and the silence was so deafening. Even she looked up. She's like, "What's happening right now?"
For someone who gives no fucks about hockey to be
Holy
like, what happened? Is he okay? Does he need a hug? Oh
Dude,
man,
I was legitimately thinking legitimately the thought crossed my mind of like, is he having a stroke? Like, is Carey Price going through a fucking medical event? And thankfully not. Like, it was, an innocent mistake of just he fucking blanked on the name. But whew, that was something. But as cringy as that was, it wasn't nearly as cringe as the reaction of Habs fans on social media to David Reinbacher.
oh no. Okay, before we go into depth with that, I will say this: every year there is usually 1 or 3 polls halfway through the season that says which is the worst hockey fan base in the NHL, and usually it's always like Leafs or whatever team talks so much, like the Canes and stuff like that. I know we have some Habs fans who listen to this podcast, but I know it's not indicative of the entirety of the fan base. But for you guys to literally harass a 18-year-old draft prospect for getting picked and to basically live out his basically short lifelong, because he's only 18, short lifelong dream of being in the NHL, getting his name called up at any point is absolutely disgusting. I know Leafs fans are also terrible and parasitical, but we do not go as far as to make Adolf jokes because he is also Austrian.
Yeah.
That is disgusting.
Yeah. That I wasn't sure whether or not I even wanted to mention that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because Jesus, you'd like to think it's only a few people who have done that, but it might not be. Habs reporter for The Athletic, Arpan Basu, is noting that they might not bring Reinbacher over due to the backlash. Now, I would like to think like that's not going to happen. Like, if David Reinbacher is ready to play in the NHL, I would like to think an NHL team is not going to risk stunting that player's development because of whinging dickheads on Twitter. You know? I'd like to think that you wouldn't trend towards giving them that power. You simply can't.
Yeah.
Like, and the problem now is those psychopaths are going to think, oh, see, David Reinbacher, he's playing in Austria again this season. We succeeded. They left him over there because of us. So now it kind of puts him in it puts me in a situation where I'm actively rooting for him to make the NHL this season, which I hope is the best thing for him. And again, it's just it's that crazy fucking nonsense, man, of like, look, we don't know. We don't know. I don't like I agree it's fun to see, okay, here's what people are saying the rankings should be. Here's what fucking Patrick Bacon, Top Down Hockey's model says. And, oh, we got we got this guy 38th. He was projected 12th, and then the Coyotes took a guy 6th overall who was projected 470th and fucking tap dance, but you simply don't know. You don't. And there's so many different aspects to player development, where that guy plays, how much effort he fucking puts in, the resources that are available, whether or not they stay healthy. You just don't know how the fuck it's going to pan out. I understand the fun of it, but especially, too, in a situation where someone like David Reinbacher, who is hopefully being kept off of fucking social media, but for an 18-year-old, good luck keeping an 18-year-old off of social media. It's just, he doesn't deserve that. Nobody deserves that. Arizona taking Dmitry Simashev, 6th overall. That might work out. We don't know. Same thing with Vancouver taking Tom Willander, 11th overall. Oh, but all of the projections say that he's not worth that pick. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. It's the most frustrating thing to me. It's just this idea of, well, TSN had Tom Willander 8th, according to Craig Button, but Bob McKenzie had him 20th, so taking him 6th, yeah, on paper it's a reach, but teams reach for players all the time and succeed. I think I've made my point clear, really.
Yeah.
Again, it's the same discourse every single year, and I just can't anymore. I can't. And look, even with Toronto, 28th overall, Easton Cowan. It might work, it might not.
Yeah,
this is a guy who, Bob McKenzie's TSN ratings had him at 53. Elite Prospects always does their consolidated rankings, which is basically taking all these other outlets and then averaging out where they're going to be. He was ranked 70th, but the Leafs also had that 28th overall pick, and then they didn't have another pick until the 5th round?
Fourth round, I think it was. It was the 4th or 5th round.
Like, clearly for them, it's like, all right, I'm sure they looked into trading options and then said, you know what? No, this is our guy. And it will work, or it won't. But for now, like I said, you can see the negative. Like, what's the negative? Oh, well, the rankings had him here. What's the positive? Well, you read a scouting guide. You sit there for Easton Cowan and see, okay, first full year in the OHL, 53 points in 68 games. That's not bad. But then you also see 21 points in 20 playoff games with the London Knights. And all of a sudden, you can start to see what the Leafs were looking at, that like, hey, yeah, no, this guy should be a first-round pick. Like I said, 5 years from now, we'll know for sure. And then, of course, there's the whole second-round thing where it's like, I can't believe Casper Halttunen, Andrew Cristall, Ethan Gauthier fell to the second round. Every single year, players fall to the second round. Like, I remember a couple years ago, it was Kaliev on the Kings, where people were like, top 10 pick, and then he went like 33rd. And it's like, oh my God, they're going to regret that. And it's like, he's been okay so far. Like, he's been okay so far for the Kings. He's on their roster. Let's see, what did he have? 28 points in 56 games last year? Like, he's an NHLer. He's not this super stud at 22 years old. He just turned 22, actually. But again, he still has time to develop. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting old and crotchety that I have these opinions about the Hall of Fame, the awards, and the draft. But
I will say
it's the same story over and over.
Yeah, I will say Aiden Fink falling to 7th round when he was projected to go like 92nd in Elite Prospects, 125th. Dude went 218th in Nashville, and that was the trade that was given. That was the pick that was given to David Poile. Yeah. So he's undersized, yeah, but he's got like 2 AJHL championships and won several accolades in the AJHL last season. So, like, he had 97 points in 54 games. 97 as an undersized guy. Now he's going to go to Penn State University next year, probably for 2-3 years. Get his education, get your money up, get your brain up. and then probably go play in the A/in the N. I looked a little bit at some of his highlights. He looks pretty decent. Granted, he's like 5'9", 154, but at the same time, he's a young guy. He's still growing. He can still size up by 20.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's the thing of it. You have to wait. I understand how fun it is to go with the reactionary aspect of it, but like I said, whether it's I don't know. Especially the negative side of things like the Ryan Bacher stuff, but even the overly positive of like, oh my God, this 4th round guy that we got is gonna be a star. Every year we do this. It's just gotten old for me. It has. I look forward to seeing how things play out and how we look back on this draft 5 years from now, because that's where the excitement is for me. This is definitely a draft that we're going to look back on and see huge swings and misses, but then there are going to be at least a couple of teams with these, controversial first rounders that absolutely got it right. And I think Montreal is probably one of them with David Reinbacher. We'll see how well that ages. But yeah, same thing every year. To wrap it up, the trades, the buyouts that had happened. First and foremost, Corey Perry was acquired by Chicago for a 7th round pick in 2024, and he has now signed a 1-year deal worth $4 million, the same exact contract as Nick Foligno. Endo Mills, cap whales exist. NHL franchise mode is real. For anyone who's ever said, Tougie, you play this game like a psychopath, it's not realistic at all, suck my dick. I was right. Cap whales exist in the NHL. I win. My win. Good day.
I will say, how do people not understand cap whales existing when Matt Murray got $6 million from Ottawa? Matt Murray got $6 million from Ottawa. End of discussion. I love Matt Murray. He's great. He's a good goalie when he's healthy. But if Matt Murray can get $6 million, man,
don't let your memes be dreams.
I was gonna.
There was well, and to this point, like Corey Perry in Chicago, I know a lot of Ducks fans are sad because it's Corey Perry in Chicago. I don't blame Corey Perry for securing the bag, right? Like, he does technically have a Stanley Cup already, so why not? Why not essentially secure the bag here late in your career? And for Chicago, again, you get veteran insulation for what will be a relatively young group. Someone goes after Connor Bedard. Don't worry. Next shift, Corey Perry will be right out there on the 4th line to try to punch someone in the face who wasn't even on the ice. Connor Bedard got attacked. Because enforcers, am I right?
Oh, fuck. Man. I love how Corey Perry just kind of morphed into this. Like, he was always like an aggressive guy, but now he's just like old man Jenkins just on the ice, just fucking punching people.
Well, Jesus, apparently Milan Lucic is rumored to go back to the Bruins, so we'll...
let's go.
A lot of people are upset about that, but I'm like, man, as long as he's getting league min or close to league min, I wouldn't care at all. I'd be, look, I kind of talked about it last time when Danny was on the show in regards to the Bruins. It's one of those things where they took their shot. They missed, but they took their shot. Now you got to suffer the consequences. You lose Taylor Hall. Like, yeah, you're going to need people like Milan Lucic to come in and, fill up a roster spot. That's bound to happen.
Yeah.
Someone who will not be... Go ahead.
Give Lucic $2 million.
Jesus. No thanks.
The trend of just overpaying people out of crazy. Just do it. Just do it.
That's the way. Someone who will not be taking up a roster spot, surprisingly, is Kyler Yamamoto, who, alongside Klim Kostin, was acquired by the Detroit Red Wings from the Edmonton Oilers for future considerations. However, Yamamoto was bought out today by Detroit. Now, it's kind of surprising, but it's also not. As a lot of people noted, buyout rules are different for players that are 25 or younger. Instead of paying 2/3 of their remaining salary, you only pay a third. So Yamamoto's cap hit this season would have been $3.1 million. Detroit now only has to pay $430,000 against the cap this season and $530,000 against the cap next season. So essentially, you acquired Klim Kostin for nothing. And clearly this shows that, they have other kind of irons in the fire right now in regards to what they're planning. I would think it's Alex DeBrincat and bringing him back home to Michigan, but we'll see what happens there. But yeah, Kyler Yamamoto will be a free agent. And, that's another one of those players where, you can kind of look back at the Oilers and that at his trend. Like, he was 22nd overall in the 2017 draft. That's about where he was projected to go in that draft. TSN, Bob McKenzie had him at 24th in that draft. So it's like, for the Oilers, it's like, cool, you get a guy pretty much right where he's expected to go. Awesome. And it just hasn't worked. Like, he's been okay. He has a career high of 41 points in 81 games played in the 21-22 season. Like, he's an NHLer, but again, it goes to show about the draft. And, to that point, actually, I should mention it too, in regards to Oilers picks not working out. Jesse Puljujarvi from the 2016 draft, it was announced that the Carolina Hurricanes aren't going to extend him a qualifying offer. And the word is that he just had his second double hip surgery in the past 5 years.
Oh, man.
Again, this is a guy in the draft who was projected consensus top 3. This is the 3rd overall pick behind Matthews and Laine. Columbus went with Pierre-Luc Dubois. And that was viewed as risky at the time, but it worked in part because Puljujarvi just got struck with horrific injuries that you can't help but feel for the guy. But, you hope his career's not over. But Jesus Christ, he's 25 years old and has already had 2 double hip surgeries. It's not looking too good. But you hope for the best for him. And, yeah, pretty rough. There's not a good transition out of that. Chicago, along with acquiring Corey Perry, also acquired Josh Bailey and a 2026 second rounder from the New York Islanders for future considerations, only to then buy out Josh Bailey because Chicago still has $21 million in projected cap space. That's why. Bailey will count for $2.6 million against the cap this season and $1.1 million against the cap next season. He is 33 years old and had 25 points in 64 games for the Islanders last year, a long ways away from his career high of 71 points in the 2017-18 season. So be intrigued to see what's next for Josh Bailey. But yeah, it's kind of sad to see someone who was a really solid player literally just be used as a pawn for, Chicago to acquire a second round pick and to pay you to not play for the team. And the Islanders, so desperate to get rid of that contract, gave up a second round pick to do it. That's, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. Hockey's not a pretty business. That's what we're getting down to. The Avs acquired Ross Colton from Tampa for a second round pick in this year's draft. It became Ethan Gauthier. Honestly, pretty good deal, I would say, for the Avs. They get a player who's a little bit more ready. Tampa gets to restock the cupboard a little bit. And then there's the trade, Endo, that broke about 10 minutes after we got done with the show with Danny on Tuesday. The New Jersey Devils acquired Tyler Toffoli from Calgary for Yegor Sharangovich and a third-round pick this year that became Adar Suniev. Sharangovich re-signed 2-year deal, $3.1 million cap hit. For Calgary, you get a prospect and a roster player, a solid player, but he's not quite Tyler Toffoli. But fully made it clear he wasn't going to sign in Calgary. So I think the Devils did a great job of swooping in and getting an upgrade for not that much. Calgary, you could argue they could have done a little bit more. But yeah, the Devils and the Eastern Conference in general, but Jesus Christ, the Devils. I would be very surprised if they don't make, at the very least, if they don't make a cup final in the next 3 to 5 years tops. And Endo agrees. They also re-signed Timo Meier.
I was just looking at Twitter, and Christian Fischer not getting, got like in qualifier, and Steve Dango's like, yeah, well, Shane Doan's a Leaf, so like we're gonna get Christian Fischer. I'm like, Steve,
you guys might.
Steven, please stop this.
There we go.
Devils also kept Timo Meier 8 years, $8.8 million, which is a tremendous deal given that his straight eights. Hey, did you know, is his number 88? Did he do a Mitch Marner?
I'm pretty sure he did.
What number are you wearing, honey? He was wearing 96. Never mind. Okay.
Close enough.
Number 88. That's fine.
He couldn't get 9.6 mil, so that's why he went 8.
I can't wait for it to be announced he's wearing 88 next season.
Oh, man.
And the last big deal was Pittsburgh acquiring Riley Smith from the Vegas Golden Knights. So one of the misfits departs the team. 2024 third-round pick. Pittsburgh, great deal for them to get a player like Riley Smith. Vegas uses that money to re-sign Ivan Barbashev at 5 years, $5 million per. I don't know. I don't know how I love the deal for Pittsburgh. Time will tell with Vegas. Did they make the right choice in moving on from Riley Smith and keeping Barbashev, or should you have let Barbashev go to free agency and keep an original expansion pick for that roster? And then the final thing, a couple of buyouts to talk about, because we mentioned it. I hate the feeling of like, oh, we're rushing, but again, we got limited time today. But we mentioned the Yamamoto buyout earlier. He wasn't the only one. Matt Duchene, Mike Riley, and Blake Wheeler have all been bought out. Duchene in Nashville, his contract was seeing him be paid $8 million for the next 3 seasons, and a 7-team no-trade list was going to be kicking in tomorrow had he still been on the team. So instead of the $8 million against the books, Nashville will be held to $2.5 million against the cap this year, $5.5 next year, then $6.5 million, and then 3 years of $1.5 million against the cap. Fair play to Barry Trotz. He's getting aggressive, retaining 50% on Johansson. This buyout of Duchene, like he's taking this team in a new direction, but that is a lot of fucking money to pay for someone to not play for your team.
Have fun replicating that in NHL 24.
Oh, fuck, yeah. Jesus Christ, you're right.
Yeah, the fuck are you going to do that? Jesus.
Oh,
you have to have like a guy. Yeah, it's weird.
I've had some moments of like, oh shit, what do I do? Because some of these salary cap retentions don't work perfectly. They just don't. Yeah, that one's going to be a bitch. An absolute bitch to try to replicate in the game. So feel free to, on my, and I saw Twitter, by the way, there is some breaking news I'm going to bring up in a second in case that's what you're reacting to. But yeah, there are some deals that are just a pain in the ass. So if you see Roman Josi making $12 million in my post-free agency roster update on the Xbox Series consoles, that would be why. Said breaking news I just referenced, Chris Johnston reporting that the Vegas Golden Knights have signed a 2-year extension with Aiden Hill worth a $4.9 million cap hit.
I don't know what it is, but goalies on like impending like things with the cup. They just get the ring. They show the ring on the table. They put it down and they go pay up and they just get money.
That is a lot of money.
Yeah, that's scary.
And
yeah,
it doesn't bode well for Robin Lehner.
Yep, about to say that. Does not,
because you are not paying Aiden Hill that much money if you're expecting Robin Lehner to be back whether or not he's dealt or if he's LTIR'd again. Robin Leonard will not be a Vegas Golden Knight next season one way or another if you're giving Aiden Hill $4.9 million. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
So good for Aiden Hill, I think, is the best response people can make. Good for him. Nobody would have ever expected, when he was dealt from the Coyotes to the Sharks and the Sharks to the Golden Knights, that here he would be as a Stanley Cup champion making $4.9 million a season. Fucking good for Aiden Hill. God damn. Also, Nashville, just to go back to that really quickly, Matt Duchene, his cap hit, which again, 2.5, 5.5, 6.5, and then 1.5 for 3 years. They also have Kyle Turris's buyout costing them $2 million against the cap for 5 more seasons. So Nashville, you are paying this upcoming season a grand total. Let me add this fucking absurdity up really quickly. They have $8.8 million in dead cap for this upcoming season between Ryan Johansson, Matthias Ekholm, Matt Duchene, and Kyle Turris. $8.8 million in dead cap. Next season, that dead cap between those 4 players is $11.8 million. So in 2024-25, they will have nearly $12 million in dead cap in Nashville. Because hopefully Endo didn't just drop or disconnect from us, but his audio did cut out. We'll hope that he's still with us. But yeah, it's true. I mean, Nashville did very well recently. And you have to, you can't really question why, like, UC Saros, his name's out there. You have to wonder what Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg feel like, each of them with at least 5 years left on their deals. We might have lost Endo, so I'll go through it really quickly. The Boston Bruins buyout Mike Riley. He was going to be making $3 million against the cap. Instead, it will cost the Bruins $333,000 this season and $1.3 million next season. Indeed, we have lost Endo Mills. And Blake Wheeler, entering the last year of his deal at $8.25 million, gets bought out, so it will instead cost the Jets $2.75 over the next 2 years. He was the sole surviving Thrasher on the Jets roster. There are no original Thrashers left, and there are only 3 left in the league: Blake Wheeler, Evander Kane, and Zach Bogosian. I'm going to wind this down just in case we have some technical issues out of this. Thank you all so much for listening, watching, supporting the show. We will be back next week. Endo, of course, you can catch wherever. All his name changes. But I should be live tomorrow during the start of NHL free agency. At least that is my hope. So keep an eye out on the Twitch side of things. And, of course, YouTube, all the fun stuff. You guys know the deal. For now, though, thank you very much again for supporting the show. And we will see you all next week.